Hi, Colleen. Welcome to Deep Into Sleep podcast.
Hi, Ishan. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I know you have quite a lot of journey in yourself, and so you've been through a lot, and you have a lot of interest topics talking about. So first, how about you introduce yourself to us briefly?
Sure. I'm Colleen Ryan-Hensley. My background is in sport and performance psychology, mental skills, mental toughness. My mission has always been to bring these skills to the masses because a lot of times we think of them with regard to extreme sports and performance and those types of things. But these are skills that I believe all of us can use on a day-to-day basis. So one of my goals is to redefine mental toughness for the next generation. And so I'm motivated to help those struggling with depression by introducing them to a new powerful method in achieving vitality, our energy for life. It's called #Binging Sober, and I'm launching in January of 2023.
Wow, that's so cool. Look forward to that. Can you mention a little bit more about this launch? What's that going to be about? How that's going to help people?
Sure. So it's the world's first points system for vitality. And the way that it works is we track. So you start by tracking the things that you typically use to escape. So some of these things, first of all, let me go back. Sober, when I refer to being sober or sobriety, I'm really talking about a lack of intoxication or a lack of consuming things that we use to escape. So I'm sure you know a lot of us maybe habitually and not even aware of these things that we're using, hoping to feel better, but a lot of times they make us feel worse. So, binge watching, binge drinking, binge eating, those types of things really just can take us down a place that we oftentimes refer to as a downward spiral, where it's just this pattern of escapism that just keeps dragging us down into a worsened state. And so I really want to illuminate the upward spiral, or things that we can do to reverse the impact of those unhealthy escape tools.
Wow, I think this is very important because in my own clinical work, I treat a lot of not only adults, but also teenagers with some kind of, maladaptive coping tools such as substance, right?
Yes.
And yes, part of that is to escape this emotional pain, to numb themselves. For some teenagers, it's because their family relationship is awful, and they trying to use this way to kind of like escape from this kind of parenting and this kind of family relationship. So it definitely is quite common and really hard to treat, in my opinion.
Yeah. I can totally relate to I was depressed in my teenage years. My parents got divorced. My grandfather, who was one of my just greatest mentors, passed away unexpectedly. So it was back then that I started to use these things. And, we can develop those habits really young and take them straight into adulthood and not even realize that we're doing it.
So what motivates you to rethink about this, and now you're helping other people? Because I think
Well,
a lot of people, it's hard for them to realize they're escaping, actually.
yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard for a lot of us to realize we're escaping because it's so accepted. So many of these things that we use to escape are so just accepted in society, so it's really this access that I've been thinking about a lot, like the access to these tools, and exactly that, social media. The pandemic really increased our access to things like alcohol. We can have anything delivered to our doors. Socially, we're online. I mean, we're really far away right now, and I love that I can talk to you. And thank you so much for having me, by the way. So I'm motivated to bring this to the masses because I've really felt the impact on myself and my own struggles with depression, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, mostly, and post-traumatic stress from a sexual assault that I experienced in the military. And it was this process that I used where I started to notice that I was wanting to experience this clarity and this vitality that I would experience at sea in the Navy. So when I didn't have access to these tools. So that was a big gift, is that I naturally had myself in this environment where I didn't have access. So I was able to experience this clean, clear state of mind that all of us have. It's just we're constantly doing things habitually that take us away from that. And so I really want to introduce that to people, and this idea that being sober is this natural state of joy.
Wow, I like that, because a lot of people, once they're in the process of depression and the post-trauma, they possibly start liking this numbness, right? And forgetting what are the like, right? What's it like when we're clear-minded and I can actually feel feelings. I guess the feeling is mostly going to be too overwhelming, too painful for some people to really experience it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I completely understand that too. It's just, this taking the first step of owning the feelings, which again is one of those things that as a society, it's just been passed down that we kind of push those feelings away. I mean, myself, growing up, when I was struggling with depression, my parents, their generation didn't really understand what that was. And so it's hard to own your own feelings when your environment isn't talking about them either. So that's why this is so important for me, is to just, start talking about it openly. These things that we consider taboo, the more we talk about it, the more it becomes, normal, and it's easier to talk about. That whole, boundary kind of loses its power, and the huge ocean of feelings, it can be really overwhelming. And I dealt with that after the Navy, when I started experiencing nightmares and things that were disrupting my sleep, and flashbacks during the day of this trauma that I had completely buried and was trying to avoid. And so once that started happening, I just, with my background, it's so funny, because I knew all of these things and all these things I should be doing, but it was still didn't make it any easier. I had all these walls up. I didn't want to feel those things. But the moment that, I'm a huge advocate for mental health. And the moment that I said the words to my therapist and told her about the trauma, it was like 1,000,000 pounds left my body. And so I know that it's hard, as somebody who struggled with those things, and for those listeners out there that maybe as well, to face those feelings. But the reward, like once you say it again, it loses its power. You can kind of look at it from afar instead of holding it inside, when you have that support and that ability to face those feelings.
Oh, I love that. First, it's very brave of you, I think, to share your story and to really face the painful memories and all this. And secondly, I think it's also, I totally agree, it's very important when we are able to face it, even though it's painful, right? Kind of bring this out of our brain, out of our chest and outside, so we can really look at that and coexist it, and slowly it impacts us less and less.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, I've come to learn that all of us have trauma. I mean, that's kind of a part of life. It's how our brain perceives something. So it could be a child losing an animal, or an adult losing it. I mean, I lost a pet last year. It was extremely traumatic. So we all have these things. And it's just like you said, just getting them out there so we can coexist. It's like an acceptance. That's a huge part of how I want to redefine mental toughness, is this acceptance of these things that are out of our control, that are a part of life, and making, mental health care a part of that mental toughness.
Right, right. I like what you mentioned. Sometimes we are trying to escape what we cannot control, right?
Yes.
But it's
Yep.
part of life. I think to be healthy and to be able to really still able to do what we want to do, we need to learn how to accept there's something are out of our control and really focus on things that we could somewhat control. That's a way to empower ourselves. And I like
Yes.
what you mentioned about the, escape. And it reminded me of a metaphor we often use. It's like you were in the military, you possibly familiar with this kind of concept that we got wounded, right? We got injured, we are bleeding. And a lot of us tend to just, cover it up, put a lot of bandage on it, don't care about it. And then what's going to happen to the wound? You don't heal it. It just gets worse and worse. And then eventually you have to deal with it. You have to get everything off and really clean it using something. And that
Yes.
was
Oh, I
painful.
love that.
Just
Yes.
the cleaning
Yes.
process is so painful. But what? Guess what? After that, you start heal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a totally different life. Like I think about that person that was just pushing people away and keeping myself like, I can take care of myself, just kind of walls, 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 and that doesn't work. Like it just doesn't work forever. And like you said, that wound, it's infected. It's down there, it's infected because you haven't healed it. And so it's just coming out, it's going to come out in your life, and it's it's again very rewarding to go ahead and, like you said, take the bandage off and really clean it and
Mhm.
heal it.
Yeah, and tolerate the pain or expect the pain. And I like what you mentioned earlier. It's just like the more you talk about that, the more you know about it, right? The less stigma around it and less scary it becomes.
Yes, yes. I mean, I was very obviously, it's not easy to talk about these things. The more I talk about it, I mean, it's kind of, I feel almost selfish now, because the more I share it, it is very, very healing. Again, when you're talking about coexisting with that, like it's still there, but now it's like, it's so different. It's not hurting me anymore, you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's wonderful that you are able to get there. And now you are trying to help more people to get there.
To get there, and also to um avoid or protect themselves from the kind of trauma that I experienced, because that also goes along with binging sober. This hashtag binging sober is about awareness, control, and balance of all of these things that we're using for escape. So really becoming aware of what those things were. So for example, 22 years ago, when I experienced this trauma, I had way too much to drink. I was in an environment where it was very culturally just accepted. It's kind of what we did. I didn't see it as anything different. And so I didn't have awareness and control, those foundations of hashtag binging sober. And so those things happened. I took full responsibility and buried the trauma, didn't report it, didn't think about it. And that's another part of this for me, is if I can instill this idea of owning the things that we're, thinking, doing, ingesting, these things that we use for escape that can put us in a very, very challenging situations, to not, to have other people not put themselves there because they're paying more attention to what they're doing and who they're around, and etc., then that's also something that I wish for in all of this.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I think you mentioned sleep a little bit. I think in this process, right? And you mentioned flashbacks, a lot of typical symptoms. I know when people escape, I heard different like versions of it. When people try to escape things, they sometimes these things come up in their dreams, become nightmares, and or some people will like wake up in the middle of the night and feel awful, like the heart is pounding, and or even have other hallucinations or sleep related. And there are also people use a lot of substance, try to put themselves to sleep. So when you mentioned this topic, I just remember so many things. It could be related to how like our sleep is, and then sleep also impact our mental health and our mood and our daily functioning. It's just a whole like you said,
Yep,
downward spiral.
Yeah, and sleep is obviously, something we have to do every day, so it's a part of that. Like you said, oh my gosh, caffeine, alcohol, like all of these things. If I have caffeine too late in the day, I can, so I still, I still manage depression, and I manage post-traumatic stress. Like, it doesn't completely go away, but now I know what I need, things that I can do. And so if I do happen to get a poor night's sleep, then, that's like kind of the start of that downward spiral, because the next day I lean on caffeine to, wake up. And then I'm anxious because I've had too much caffeine. And then, I am anxious. So what? Maybe I have a drink because I'm trying to feel better from feeling anxious. And all of this stuff is happening in the background. And I'm just, escaping to try and deal with it. But what happens when I have that alcohol? Well, now my next night of sleep is messed up as well. And it just keeps going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. So all these years, when you're escaping, how do you manage anything come up in your sleep? Do you have nightmares? Do you have like anything happen that impact your sleep?
Yes. And this is, again, part of that process of hashtag binging sober, is really becoming aware of what those things are, those triggers that either, those triggers that cause me to want to avoid feelings and escape. And so there are some basic things that I do that really impact my sleep. I love horror movies and horror TV shows. But I can't watch, like, if I watch them, I have to watch them early in the day. I have to, read something positive before bed, because that kind of thing, sometimes these storylines can trigger flashbacks and things while I'm sleeping. But I did when I was a teenager. I was experiencing, a lot of anxiety at home. And so I started having nightmares as a teenager, and I've always had very, very vivid dreams. So I happened to be talking about this with someone. It was kind of like a just circumstantial. It was like a stranger I was talking to about this, and they mentioned lucid dreaming, and I didn't know what that was at the time. So I was 14 or 15, I got a book on lucid dreaming and taught myself to lucid dream. And that's a skill that now I've had my whole life. However, that skill, you have to be pretty well rested in order for it to work. And for listeners, lucid dreaming is, becoming conscious or aware that we're sleeping. And so you're able to manipulate your dreams. And so if I'm not well rested, if I've done things that impact my sleep, I can't do that. And so in the midst of a nightmare, there's even this like awareness, oh my gosh, I'm having this nightmare. Sometimes I can get that awareness in my dream, and it almost makes me, more anxious because I'm not rested enough to fix it while I'm sleeping.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, what you are doing sounds like very similar to how we normally treat nightmares that trauma related.
Oh.
Because one thing, like clinically, what people are doing is to help us to reframe our stories in the nightmare. For some people has trauma history, sometimes they will have similar themes of nightmares. They either repeat, right?
Yeah.
Repeat the attack or assault or some kind of things relate to that. So in the dream, in the nightmare, people feel so powerless and I cannot do anything, or I got hurt again, right? So one way to deal with it is when we are awake, we are trying to rewrite the story.
Yes.
And change it
Love
to
that.
something we are more powerful, and we rehearsal that. And then by doing that purposely, consciously, hopefully that's going to impact our dream. So in the dream, like what you did, we are able to somehow change the storyline and control the dream a little bit.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of work, but that's awesome. Yeah, I've journaled. Like that's how I taught myself to lucid dream to begin with, is through journaling. So I'm going to try that. Now you said that, like kind of rewrite it afterwards. Things that I've taught myself were like, there are certain things in dreams that are obviously not going to be the same in reality. So for example, if you teach yourself to, if you should have while you're sleeping. Okay. So throughout the day to be like, look at the clock and then look at the clock again, which obviously was probably on our wrist these days. Well, so when you're sleeping, you start doing that too. Like you'll start looking for a clock. When you do, if you look back at it, it's probably going to be weird, gone, melted, a weird time. So then there's these little dream signs that we all have, that if you're thinking about them during, the day, like you said, to rewrite things, like to really put some work in, then you're going to trigger the same thoughts while you're sleeping, and you're able to, really kind of become more involved, or, own your sleeping life, which is awesome.
Yeah, now you mentioned that, I never really connect this together, but I think I actually by accident doing that when I was younger. So I had very interesting dreams too. And when I was young, I figured out one cue, like you are looking at the clock, right? I bite my finger. That's my cue. So I noticed in my dream, I don't have bones in my finger.
Oh my gosh.
So it still looks the same, but when I bite it, it's like soft.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
My cue to tell myself, oh, I'm in a dream. So I remember actually I did it multiple times in the dream to tell myself, okay, never mind, this is a dream.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I'm gonna try that.
And when you mentioned the horror movie, I totally get it. I watch horror movie too. I love horror movie. But the same thing, when I watch horror movie, I have to use a pillow to cover my eyes. For all the horrible scenes, my friends are like,
why are you watching it?
Watching it.
It's exciting. I don't know. I've always liked horror movies. Yeah.
But it goes into my dream. Maybe not that same night, but in the future, one night, right? It may pop up in my dream. I remember I dream about like zombies. And I
was just gonna say big on zombies. So a lot of times I have these apocalyptic dreams, but they're different themes. Like in some, I'll be like a leader and it'll be a really powerful dream. And then in others, it's just a mess. So it really all depends on my state of mind when I go to sleep, really. So
right. But I like what you mentioned. You want to be cautious about whether you get enough sleep, right? What would make you be able to empower yourself better in your dream? And sometimes I think if we prepare it, if we are consciously thinking about it, our dream can have a healing power.
Oh my gosh, 100%. Yep.
Yeah, I sometimes have very healing dreams. I have like bad day, bad time, and I thinking about that. And in my dream, there's something happened. Something happened to empower myself, make me feel like it's not so bad. You see, I can still do something like the zombie thing. I remember I jump up a castle and all the zombies are down there. So I was like, oh, great. I
I'm glad I'm not alone in the zombie dreams. I'm sure there's a lot of us out there.
Yeah, but we can empower ourselves. We can make it different, right? We can save ourselves in the dream.
I love that. And it's so like the impact that can have on the next day is, like you said, some of them can be healing. And if they're not, like if I've done something, if I've done something the day before, maybe used an escape that's not very healthy that impacts my sleep. I mean, it just, like we were talking about, this downward spiral, it just goes into the next day. Like the opposite is true. Like when you have a horrible night's sleep and horrible dreams, I mean, you can just take that right into your day and not even notice.
Right. And at the same time, I think it's actually a mindset thing, right?
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
you've been working in this field, I'm sure you experienced that a lot. And we can always break this
Yep.
downward spiral.
Yes.
And we notice the trigger, we expect it to happen, or it just happened. Then what we can do to cope with it and reset and help us to, start a different cycle. It's
Yes.
totally doable.
Yes. And that's what hashtag binging sober is about. It's not about long periods of abstinence from these things, because Ishan, if you tell me not to watch horror movies, that's all I'm going to want to do is watch horror movies, right? If you tell me I can have popcorn, I'm going to want the popcorn. It's not about long periods of abstinence. It's about just taking some time away from those things, reflecting, seeing how that feels, recording it. That's where the points come in, because we assign our own points to the system and how these things impact us, because what impacts me a certain way might impact you in a completely different way. So that's really important. And so, yeah, you can choose to do those things, but when you choose to, say, have a couple of glasses of wine, knowing how it's going to impact you over the long term, it gives you more power over it. And you can also then look, decide what other things you can do. For example, like if I do watch a horror movie, like I said, I'll read something positive before bed. I'll meditate before bed to get in a better, mental state before bed. So then I'm gaining positive points and reversing the impact that the horror movies had on me.
Yeah.
So you're moving yourself up and down this scale of vitality using points you've assigned and tailored to yourself.
I love that. And also you mentioned journaling. I think it's similar concept, right? We always tell our patients don't journal right before bedtime.
Oh,
Especially if you're journaling something about negative memories, negative
oh,
emotion.
yeah.
Try to do that as early as possible in the day and away from the bedroom.
Yeah,
So you don't dwell on those feelings after journaling and get it into
that
sleep.
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't really thought
Yeah.
about it that way. Because I've journaled a lot before bed to get that stuff out. So it's not, in my head, but I can see how that might be impacting me that I haven't even noticed.
Yeah, well, that's another way. Like sometimes for some people, if they're very anxious, I think it's helpful for them to jot down whatever on their mind, like the to-do list, and
Right.
then
Right.
get out of the way. They
Yeah.
can sleep. So whatever works for you, for each
Again,
person.
very individual. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I always say at the end of the episode. Each episode, I have this little blur thing says sleep is an individual thing, right? It's very individual. And mental health and coping strategies and what works for each person is so different too.
Yes. Yes. And I think we have this thing where we just, society, tend to lean on social ideas of what things are. For example, happiness. Let's just talk about happiness or success. I mean, have you looked at that yourself? It's important to say, okay, what is happiness for me? Because it has nothing to do with anybody else when it comes down to it. And so I think it's the same with all of this, is that really taking the time to look at things from our own perspective in spite of what all of these other ideas are around us. And I think
Yeah,
that's
this is so.
yeah.
This is so important. I love that, to look at our own perspective, and it's so hard
It
because
is.
for example, I live in San Francisco Bay Area, right? I don't know how people think about this area, but I noticed this area, a lot of people are pursuing money and materialistic things. So a lot of people are not happy. They
Yep.
possibly, if they look at themselves, they could be satisfied with their life, and or at least other people look at them, like really look up to them, feels like they're doing great, right? But they don't feel happy. They look even upper and they feel like, oh, I need more money, better
Mhm.
house, and better this, better that. So they could not look at themselves and find appreciation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important to do that.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, that as a child, teenager with depression, and even, getting into adulthood, if you're not looking at what you consider your own personal happiness and success, and you're, just living by some expectation of society or someone around you, that causes depression. If you feel like you're not hitting this idea of what happiness is that we see, all over social media and television and marketing and all of that, where everybody's tipping the bottle back and having a great time. It's not really what it looks like. I mean, I found myself through this process of hashtag binging sober that if you think about a scale, so 0 being a balance on the scale, that's the ideal place for this idea of binging sober, is balance. It's not about this like, yay, like, woo, party, happy all the time. That's not real life. And so as I've tracked this over the years and really figured out this process, sometimes if I'm at like a -1 on the scale, I feel really good. But I wouldn't know that unless I did that work for myself and really reflected on myself. And so that's why it's so important. Like some days I feel great being a little bit blue, and that's okay. But we live in this place where we all think that we have to run around with giant smiles on our face. And how are you doing today? I'm great. And that's not real life.
I know that's I remember that's a culture shock when I was in China. I grew up in China, so we always talk to friends, right? We don't really ask people how you're doing, but we do answer like, "Oh, I have a horrible day, and I have something bad happen," and friends will bounce back ideas, right? After I came to America, everyone like, "How are you?" But I noticed if you really say, "Oh, I had a horrible day," or something happened to me,
Like this,
are like, bye. It's like, well, what's the point of asking how are you? So later I learned, when other people ask, how are you? You're supposed to say, fine, thank you.
Yeah.
It's not a chance to invite you, say more about your time.
Which makes it harder for people to face their real feelings if nobody's willing to, listen. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very different. And also we talk about in Chinese culture, friends will tell you, oh, you're gaining more weight, or you look tired.
It's like authentic and honest. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable to a lot of Westerners when they hear that. They're like, oh, that's horrible.
Well, I'm originally from New Jersey, so very straightforward type of, socialization. And I live in Texas where that is not really accepted. And I learned that pretty quickly.
So interesting how each place its own little culture, how people want to interact with each other is so different.
Yeah.
Yeah, but social support is so important for our mental health overall.
Yeah. That's why coming out of this pandemic has just been so extra hard on everybody who's already struggling with things,
Yeah, and I heard a pandemic actually make people harder, more difficult to stay sober.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I noticed that really early on in the pandemic. I was definitely doing things just out of habit to try and not think about what was really going on. I mean, that was really scary. I don't even like to talk about it right now, like it was a really scary time.
Yeah. And hopefully by now people are getting out of their house and socializing and trying more things and like living a healthier lifestyle and pay more attention to the mental health.
Yes. Hopefully. I mean, feel like we've been talking about it a lot more since, like during and since, because we really had to. We were like forced to as a society, but that's a good thing if we're able to talk about it more. Now, I've read recently that, now, I mean, it's wonderful that people are willing to say, hey, I need help, I need support, and the system isn't ready for it. So, we need resources and alternative therapies and alternative programs. I mean, they're out there. And that's another reason why I really thought that now was a good time to launch #binging sober, because it's a non-clinical intervention, and ideally 5-year vision, we're evidence-based, but it's something that I really wanted to get out there immediately because I know the impact this type of thinking has had on me.
Yeah, that's great that you're launching something like that. And I'm in the system. I'm a clinical psychologist. I noticed like we have far more clients than
Yes.
we could handle. I actually do need to hire more clinicians. So that's an ongoing project, but it's really hard. So
Sure,
no matter
sure.
how many clinicians we have, I feel like there's no way we could really provide enough support. So there need to be other type of support out there, right? Other alternative methods to help people because each person's level is different. They sometimes just need some basic support or some peer support. Some people may need a little bit more. Some people are very severe, really need a lot of clinical intervention. So I hope there are more and more resources and legit resources out there to really help people. Yeah.
Yes. And maybe it is as simple as, if you ask somebody how they're doing and they're not doing okay, maybe talk to them about that just for a little,
Don't
get a
run.
little
Don't run
social
so quick.
support. Yeah. My gosh.
Yeah, I think that's an overall education. Hopefully, even in school, people can start learning how to support other people's emotion, even a little bit. That would be
Yes.
so helpful. And if all the parents can learn how to start carrying out some conversations about emotions in the household, that's going to be so helpful.
And teachers, oh my gosh, teachers need
Yeah.
so much support, and they're doing a bulk of this emotional, dealing with the emotions of hundreds of children. Oh, there's just, we really need to start talking about this more and make sure that everybody's supported. And it's so hard in a society like ours where we're always talking about how great things are.
Yeah. We need a balance. We cannot just, like you said, escaping won't solve the problem, I think. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So I look forward to the launch. So how people can participate in this binging, #binging sober launch?
So the launch is happening in January of 2023. For more information, please go to ColleenRyan-Hensley.com. It's HENSLEY. And I'm going to be starting focus groups here soon. So there will be opportunities for maybe some pre-January talks and education and that sort of stuff.
Great. Yes. I will put all your information in the show notes and our website at deepintosleep.co. So hopefully, when people are listening or searching online, they will be able to find your launch, your great resources.
Thank you. Thank you, Ishan. It's been so fun talking to you.
Yeah, thank you, Colleen. This is wonderful. Enjoy talking to you and all this fun stuff. And we have something in common. That's really cool. We should have a time just talk about a horror movie. How to sleep. I think that would be awesome.
That would be awesome. Let's do that. I'm gonna do some research after this. I'm gonna try some different things around the horror movies and the zombies, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and you will be surprised. I cannot find people to watch horror movie with me. So, but if I gonna find someone, it's gonna be girls, not boys.
Really?
So
oh, that's interesting.
I have girls' night for horror movies. My girlfriend's husband refused to join because he refused to watch any horror movie at all. So my girlfriends in the same situation, they could not find anyone to watch horror movie together. So when we talk about that, we were like, great, let's get together so we can watch it.
I love it. That's interesting. I guess it's something that I don't try to find a support group for, but maybe I should. My husband, thankfully, my dear husband watches them with me.
Oh, great.
I'm not sure we could be married if he didn't, because I just love them so much.
Isn't a horror movie a great way of dating? There's psychological research on that, right? The girl you like to a horror movie, so they're gonna like you more. But if a guy cannot watch it, what can they do?
Oh, interesting. I like it. It's a good direction.
Yeah, this is awesome. We're gonna have to find another time to do it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Colleen.
Thank you,
Thank you
Isha.
very much. And any last wisdom you want to share with everyone? Any last word?
Just give hashtag binging sober a shot. You can feel it in as little as a day, as little as 3 days. So, just really thinking about awareness, control, and balance of these things that we habitually use to escape. Let's turn it around and take the wheel from those together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And hopefully our audience, right, whoever are listening right now, and follow Colleen and pay attention to this launch and see whether it's something could really help you in your life.
Thank you, Ishan.
Yeah.